Before we get started, I'll wait a moment. Okay, thank you. Before we get started today, I'd like to ask all of you at this time to turn off your cell phones, other electronic devices, and put them away so we can have your undivided attention for our program this morning. Wednesday, we all had the opportunity to witness the reenactment and the realities of a DUI car crash. Today, we're going to ask you to listen to individuals who experienced the true impact of the tragedy of this nature. On a warm June night during senior week in 2005, a tragedy occurred on the streets of Ocean City, Maryland, streets that some of you may be very familiar with. Justin Sheftel was killed. Ben Walter was the driver of the car that struck and killed Justin. That night, their lives changed forever, with a profound rippling effect on their families, friends, and the communities in which they lived. A criminal prosecution followed with a trial by jury. On February 6, 2006, a plea agreement was reached. This occurred through the infinite wisdom of the judge, the cooperation of the attorneys, and the compassion of the victim's family. A civil claim was also pursued for damages for the wrongful death of Justin. Instead of possibly spending 5 to 15 years in prison, Ben Walter pleaded guilty to homicide by vehicle, DUI related. Ben completed the mandatory probationary phase of his sentence by speaking publicly to high school students for 3 years with Linda Sheftel per the plea agreement. He and his family continue to intertwine with the Sheftel family to spread the message regarding the dangers of drinking and driving. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in hearing Benjamin Walter share his story.
My name is Benjamin Walter. I'm the driver that struck and killed Justin Sheftel on the early morning of June 15th, 2005. In all my life, it never crossed my mind that I would sit behind jail for vehicle homicide, DUI related. I always thought it would never happen to me. But it can happen to anyone, anywhere, anytime if you make that wrong decision to drink and drive. I want everyone to ask themselves a couple questions as all of us are speaking today. First, are you willing to give up your future plans and dreams for one wrong decision? And second, can you live with the guilt and pain that you can cause yourself, your family, and people that you have never even met? I was your average high school student. I graduated from Wilson High School in 2005. I played a lot of sports, but I mostly loved playing baseball. I was a pitcher, and I loved being on the mound and being in control of the game. When I graduated, I remember telling myself I just wanted to move on to the next step of my life. But Lord knows I wasn't ready for what the real world had in store for me. After graduation came many parties and celebrations with friends and family, and then we would head off to senior week. So being so excited and thinking nothing wrong with senior week, I packed my bags and I left. But before the day I left, I sensed my mom really didn't want me to go. I knew she had a bad feeling about me leaving, but there was nothing anyone could do or say to change my mind. Life is all about choices. Where you go, what you do, who you hang out with, and what you drink. As soon as you put any drug or alcohol in your body, the ability to make any responsible choice goes right out the window. I left to meet up with my friends, and we left around midnight to beat any traffic on the way down to Ocean City, Maryland. And when we got there, I remember going to the beach and watching the sunrise and getting ready for senior week. Those next few days just flew by. On June 14th, we left to go to a party on 1st Street. and we stayed on 94th Street. So I decided to drive down with a couple of my friends, and all I really wanted to do was just have a good time and relax. But shortly after drinking a couple beers, I didn't feel how I wanted to feel. I felt really lonely, and yet all my friends were around me. We left after a couple hours when we went back to 94th Street. And I remember getting a phone call from one of my friends saying that they want to hang out and party with us. So making a split decision and not thinking about it, I grabbed my keys and I asked if anybody wants to come with me. And one of my friends came with me. We jumped in my car and we proceeded down the coastal highway. And the next few minutes just flew by. I remember approaching 77th Street, and it was there where I saw Justin and two of his friends cross my lane and into the next. And Justin stopped and went back to the median. And then next thing I know, my windshield smashed, my friends yelling at me, and I don't even know where I am anymore. The state of shock I was in, I just left and went back to where I was staying. I ran into the place that we were staying at, and I told all my friends that I hit someone on the highway. And they all thought I was joking, but as soon as they all looked at my car, the reality set in. I remember telling myself that I couldn't run away from this. I had to own up to what I've just caused. And I got back in my car and I headed back to the scene. And on the way there, so many emotions was going through my head, but the biggest emotion was fear of the unknown, fear of how am I going to live with this, fear of is the pedestrian dead. When I pulled up, I saw a cop and I told him that I was the driver that struck and hit the pedestrian. He sat me on the curb and handcuffed me and asked me a whole bunch of medical questions, but I was okay. All I was concerned about was the pedestrian, and he couldn't tell me any information about it. After a while, they put me in a cop car and they took me to the jail there. And it was there where I would sober up and think about what just happened. I remember sitting in that jail cell and seeing the phone on the wall. I just couldn't gather the strength to call my parents. I just figured someone would. A couple hours later, an officer came in and validated my worst fear. He told me the pedestrian was an 18-year-old male and he was from Pennsylvania, and he did die at the scene. At that point, I just wanted this nightmare to be over. I remember saying to myself, oh, I'm gonna wake up, I'm gonna be at my house, and this is all just one big nightmare. But it wasn't. Every time I would open my eyes, there was bars and concrete. A couple hours later, another officer comes and he says I'm being bailed out, that my parents are here. So he handcuffs me and put shackles on me. And I remember walking down this long hallway, and at the end of the hallway, my parents are standing there with such a look of disgrace on their face. I got bailed out, and I remember my mom just wanted to hold me, but I told her I don't deserve anything, not even a hug. The next day, we met with a bunch of attorneys, and I would relive that night over and over again. After a while, we left to head back to Pennsylvania, and I remember the whole way home just saying to myself, how am I going to deal with this? How am I gonna live with this for the rest of my life? When we got home, I was admitted into the Reading Hospital, the Spruce Pavilion, for suicidal thoughts. And while I was there, I was put on some medication to help deal with all the nightmares and all the flashbacks. And after I was released from there, I was put on house arrest. I would remain on house arrest until I would appear in court. Being on house arrest, I was on there for about 7 months. And then we got word that I would have to plead guilty to vehicle homicide, DUI related. If I didn't plead guilty, I would probably spend time in the state penitentiary, which nobody wanted. On the day of the court hearing, it was the first time I met Justin's parents, and I don't recall saying anything to them at all. I didn't know exactly what to say to them. I remember the judge asking me if I wanted to say anything, but I said very little. And the next thing I know, I was being taken behind the courtroom. And it was there where I remember saying to myself, it's going to be a very long time before I see my parents again. When I was in Maryland prison, I didn't know what to do or where to turn. I couldn't tell the difference between my dreams and reality for a very long time. And when it was time to be released from jail, with all my accumulated time, it turned out to be about 13 months. But I quickly learned that the feelings that went with June 15th, 2005 would not just go away with a little time in jail. No, soon enough, I was saying one thing and doing something completely different. In other words, I was telling everyone that I was okay and I was doing good, when really, I just wanted to die. I didn't want to wake up in the morning. I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror. I would still go to work and take care of my responsibilities. But when the weekend came, I turned into a completely different person. I was trying to drink my problems away. Eventually it caught up with me, and I couldn't take it anymore. So one night in 2008, I got really drunk and tried to take my life again. But God had different plans for me. I ended up getting pulled over and getting another DUI. That night I was taken into jail, and I didn't call anybody to let them know where I was. So the next day I was released, and I walked home, and all I could think about was just ending my life. And after failed suicide attempts, I was admitted into the Reading Hospital again. When it was there, I got the help I needed. Justin's mother came to me and told me that Justin has forgiven me, and it was time that I forgave myself. And from then on, I made the right steps to do so. But at first I had to overcome a lot of hurdles. I had to deal with the consequences that came with that night in 2008. I would spend time in Berks County Prison for the DUI, and then be extradited to Maryland for the violation of probation. And it was there where I would go in front of the same judge that I saw before. And he knew that I was really a prisoner in my own mind. He knew that I haven't forgiven myself. and he knew that I was killing myself. So he gave me a second chance, but I would still serve time in the Maryland prison. After I was released from the Maryland prison the second time, I did what I needed to do to start forgiving myself. I now make the right decisions. I now tell people exactly what's going on with me. And I have a lot of support from friends and family. I actually felt comfortable in my own skin and not wanted to die every night and every day. I have taken steps to forgive myself for the wrong choices that I have made in the past. Like I said in the beginning of my speech, life is all about the decisions that you make. If you make positive choices in your life, you'll have positive outcomes. If you make negative choices in your life, you'll have negative outcomes. I must never forget where I came from, for I am sure to end up right back there. Please don't drink and drive. Life is so much better when you make the right choices for yourself, for your family, and your community. If you're underage, I know it is easier to get sucked into that peer pressure. God knows I did. Just try and find something else to do with your time. You'll be greater for it later on in life. Thank you.
Now that we've heard Ben's story, it's my pleasure to introduce Linda Sheftel.
Thank you. We are now coming up on a 10-year anniversary of Justin's death. And I realize although there are changes and updates of how we're coping, what we're doing, not a lot has really changed. You know, we still miss him, we still think about him every day, and in some ways it has gotten a little easier, but in a lot of ways I find it harder as the years go by. You know, both my husband and I think about where would he be, what would he be doing. We want our, you know, we would like our son back in our life. We miss that boy stuff that he would bring to the table. And I wanted to see Justin grow up to be a man. So today, as Pete said, we're going to really be talking about the loss and what happens behind the scenes so that you can actually see what the impact is and not just see a headline of somebody got killed by a drunk driver, but to actually know how it affects not just our family, but the communities and also the Ben's family and his community. We're trying to personalize the story so you can relate and understand what happens. The other objective for this, at least is a little selfish for me, but is to just honor my son and his life and to honor his memory. And I guess this is my way of still being his mom. I can't do his laundry for him anymore. I can't cook for him. I can't shop for him. I can't talk to him. So I can't even talk about him, about his future. So this is my way to forever honor him and who he was by talking about him and hoping maybe some of this will have an impact. You know, I always thought I could fix anything, make anything easier or better, and that was what was really tough in this situation. I couldn't fix it. I couldn't make it better. And as my husband has said, losing a child is every parent's nightmare, and we are living that nightmare every day of our lives. I once read somewhere where there is not a name for a parent who loses a child. You know, we have the terms widow and widower for spouses that predecease their spouse, but nothing if a child dies before their parent. And the author of that book made the point that perhaps because it was just so horrible, not a normal act of nature, that there really could not be a word or a noun attached to those people that would or could describe the state of losing a child. I totally get that statement. And recently, I was reading a book for a book club I'm in, and it had a very similar statement to that. But it also added a statement that said the hardest thing, to me at least, that it asked in that book was, is the sibling still a sister or a brother if they have lost their only sibling? You know, just recently, actually this week, my daughter was home visiting us from school, and one of the comments she made was how much she missed not having a sibling anymore. And she's not a sister to anyone anymore. And that just broke my heart. You know, she was saying she sees her friends with their siblings, and their siblings are growing up and they're getting married, and some of them are even having babies now. And she just says, I just don't have that. I don't have Justin here. So also, in this same book, as you can tell it was a real happy book, it had a number of mothers that were in that book that had lost their sons in war. And as hard as it was to read this, it also taught me something, that I'm not alone in my view of this grief. This kind of grief, there really just isn't any closure in this situation. There's no moving on. You get through it, you just don't forget it, and you never feel totally all right. Rather, you learn kind of just how to manage your days and manage the pain. One thing I know for sure is that who we are and what we have, and who and what we have as far as our situations that we live through, will define us in the future. For us, it was losing Justin that will forever redefine us as a family, as people. We are no longer the same. Our sense of joy has changed. As I have said to our daughter, we are no longer normal. We have to live with the new normal. And so what we have been doing, and you kind of saw that in Ben's speech, is we took you through a chronology of events. And we're going to do the same. I'm going to do the same thing too, kind of from our perspective of what happened. But before I start that chronology, I'd like to give you just a little information about Justin. Just take a few minutes to talk about him. As you know, I'm his mom, and Justin was the love of my life. I adored him. My role as his mom really defined me from the day he was born. He was a very bright, energetic young man with an unlimited potential in his future. He was quirky, but he managed to light up the whole room. He worked hard all through school, and he got high grades and really worked hard to get his SAT scores up. He had a tremendous diversity of friends and was an avid baseball fan. He also was a left-handed pitcher, and he was planning on pitching for this team in college. He loved the Boston Red Sox. He was on the verge of his independence and was looking forward to going to college to pursue his dreams. Because of his grades and his SAT scores, he was accepted to and was planning on attending Washington University in St. Louis, WashU, which is probably one of the finest non-Ivy League schools in the country. So you can see why he had a tremendous future, and we were just so proud and excited for him. When we lost Justin, not only did we lose our son, our sense of purpose and peace, we lost our dreams for our family, dreams for Justin and our future with him. We now think, as we watch his friends, what would Justin be doing? Where would he be? Would he have graduated? Would he have gone on to grad school? Would he have a girlfriend? Where would he be living? Those are all questions we think. The impact on his father was tough. He no longer has his son. I know he misses all that companionship and male bonding that has been taken from him. Some of my best memories of Justin and his dad playing sports in the backyard, playing basketball in the driveway. Losing Justin had a major impact on his sister. She no longer has a brother, no one to look up to conspire with, to take vacations with, to talk to tease, to fight with, to laugh with. She is now an only child. She's struggled with her grief over the years. She's had some bad days, and truthfully, it's changed her whole life, her perspective of life, and how she's going to end up fitting into this world. I remember shortly after Justin died, Sasha was back in high school, and she came to me one morning, and she said, I just can't go to school. I'm having a really bad day. So she stayed home, and we talked about Justin. And I asked her, what did she miss the most? She said, Mom, I just miss everything about him. We know the extended family is starting to feel the loss, too, his cousins, his aunts, and uncles. And what's important here, guys, I think key, is that Justin was not anyone different from any of you sitting here in the auditorium right now. He had his friends, he had a community, he was well-loved, and he is missed by this community. Now I'll go over the chronology of events. June 13th, Monday morning, Justin and his friends went to graduation rehearsal. They came back from the shore to attend. We had dinner with his cousins at his grandmother's house. We were all together. One of his cousins was actually graduating with him at the same time. They were just a couple months apart. It was a wonderful ceremony. I think most of the seniors were just glad to get through the service and get on with their lives. Who could blame them? I remember standing for a prayer and wanting to bless everyone in the auditorium. I felt so blessed and happy, and I just felt like I could burst with joy for where he was. And back at home, Justin's friends came over. They were heading back to the shore. I was in bed, and he came to the door to say goodbye. I warned him to please be responsible. Don't drink and drive, and don't get into a car with anyone who is drinking. He, of course, said, and I know all of you all have said this at another time in your life, don't worry, Mom, I'm going to be fine. And I did tell him at that time I had a pit in my stomach, and it's not going to go away until he came home on that Saturday. So please take care of yourself. I said, I love you. He said he loved me more. I said, it's not possible. I'm the mom. I'm the one that loves more. That's the last time I saw my son alive. June 15th, Wednesday morning, we get a call from his cousin Missy, who was also at the shore, and she's screaming and crying. And all I remember her saying is, Aunt Linda, Justin has been hit by a car, and the guy left the accident. I just kept saying to Missy, Missy, please tell me he's okay. Is he okay? I think she knew he wasn't, but I don't think she could tell me. She kept saying, I don't know. I think so, I don't know. I run downstairs to get my cell, and I frantically try to call Justin's cell phone, but I'm getting no answer, and run back upstairs, and I try to call Missy back, and my hand's shaking so bad I can't hit the button numbers. We get another call from someone at the sea, and they tell us Justin has been hit, and the guy that hit him left. We don't even know who this person is that's talking to us. We then get another call from the same person, and they tell us that Justin is gone. All I remember is screaming to this stranger on the phone, what do I do, what do I do? And then it just goes blank. I know somebody must have called Elliot's family, someone called my family in Florida. People just started running into the house to be there for us. I do remember going into my daughter's room and waking her up and having to tell her brother had died. It was probably one of the saddest and hardest things for us to do. Slowly over the night, the reports started to come back in. The driver was drunk. He did come back. He was speeding, and there were people in the car. As you can imagine, all this information was coming back to us in bits and pieces. What we were able to piece together is that Justin and a friend were running across the street, and Justin's Red Sox hat blew off. He went back to retrieve it, and apparently he had retrieved the hat and continued across the street, and then he was hit. I don't know how the next days passed. It's all kind of a blur. I know we made plans for the service, and his dad insisted on speaking, and we are setting up others that were going to speak at the service. I do remember going to see Justin in the funeral home. It was a private viewing, and the three of us all elected to go. Because of his injuries, we can only see half of his face, and the rest of him was pretty covered up. I remember I kissed him and felt his hair, and I squeezed his arm. And I remember I just wanted to stay there with him and just go to wherever he had gone. But I couldn't do that. I just wanted to be with him. Later we went back, the three of us again, and put in some personal items in the coffin with him. I put it as Puffalopolis. It was his first stuffed toy I'd ever bought for him, and he still had it on his bed. Sasha put in a Red Sox t-shirt, and Elliot a baseball hat. We all cried and said our goodbyes individually to him. And looking back now, it feels like we were just going through a dream, actually a nightmare. All seemed like it was in slow motion. At the funeral, I remember the synagogue being really packed and just really quiet and so sad. I remember it was hard going through the service. Elliot did speak, my husband, and wanted me to go up with him. He needed the support. So he went and read a beautiful tribute to our son, and I am so glad that he had the strength to do that. We had members of our family speak along with a couple of his friends. We felt numb, as if this really wasn't happening to us. When Justin was buried, the lowering of the casket was awful. I felt like just jumping in with him. It took a lot to stare ahead and not take in what was really happening. After we left, his friends stayed and filled in the gravesite, one shovel of dirt at a time. It took them a couple of hours to do that. And I remember thinking they finished it, and God bless them for caring for him so much. As you can imagine, over the years, our family has been in therapy. We've been treated for depression. We've had some physical and mental effects for our loss. We find the holidays are tough every year for both Elliot's and my families. Traditions have changed. It's just not the same without Justin there. Sasha seems to be coping. That's my daughter, but she's not the same. The first year, she really started to feel her loss. She would have breakdowns at school. She had to leave school. She had dropped dance and dropped some additional activities she was in. She will never have that secure feeling in her life again, the one that she once had, that everything will be okay. You know, and this does keep coming up. She flew back yesterday, and I called her just because I hadn't heard that she had landed and what have you. And she texted me and she said, "Is everything okay? I'm in class." She gets very nervous about things like that. If I go away and I don't tell her where I am, I'll pick up my phone and I'll have 7 or 8 phone calls from her. She just doesn't have that secure feeling, that safety net there anymore. And I think that's hard for her. She struggled for a while with depression, had a couple breakdowns while in college. One of the hardest and saddest times for me was when I went up to see her due to a breakdown. We had sat down and we had a meeting with the school's counselor, and we set up some appointments with a psychologist. She said she felt like she had to be okay for us, because if she was okay, we would be okay. I think, when I look back on it, I think that's how we all were working with our grief. Was just trying to be okay for everyone else, and nobody was really doing that great. I dropped her off at class and was heading back down to Allentown, and she just burst into tears and started sobbing. And I asked her, "What's wrong, Sasha?" I said, "We've got things set up. This is going to work out. You'll be fine. You'll be good. I'll come back up next weekend if you need." And she just said she was scared. And I said, "Well, what are you scared of?" She was scared that she would never be happy again. And I have to say, hearing that from your 19-year-old daughter was a real hard thing, and to realize how hard she was struggling with that grief. I have to say, she's doing really good now. I'm so proud of her and of her strength. She's graduating from graduate school in June with a nutrition major. She's got an internship, which we just found out about, and she'll be working with the VA hospital, doing rounds with them for over a year so she can get her dietetic license. I'm just very proud of her, and I'm in awe, really, of her strength. Looking back over the years, what I've learned is that no one wins in these situations. Ben made terrible mistakes that night. Drinking first, underage drinking, and then drinking and driving. He was 19 years old, and he's going to have to live with this the rest of his life, knowing he killed someone. There are no winners here. No one walks away from this without their pain, because there was a choice made to first drink, to get drunk, and then to make a bad decision to get behind the wheel of a car. Currently, as you can imagine, we still have our ups and downs. We're learning to act okay. I think about and miss Justin every day. We have to celebrate his life, and we do continue to honor him. 10 days after Justin died, a group of his friends got together and held a softball tournament in his honor to raise money to fund a memorial fund that we had set up. I still am I cannot believe how they were able to put this together 3 weeks after he died. I will forever be grateful to those kids that did that. This little softball tournament that started with 4 teams has now grown to 22 teams. We have a men's and women's division with over 300 players and with a lot of volunteers and fans. We usually have about 1,000 people that come out during the day. And this year will be our 11th annual tournament. And over the last 8 or 9 years, we've donated over $275,000 to Parkland High School for their graduating senior scholarships, the Miracle League, Allentown School District for their middle school baseball program, the Boys and Girls Clubs, Weston Youth Center for their softball and baseball program, Second Harvest, a bunch of others too. And we're going to continue to donate to local charities throughout our community and continue our work to honor and keep Justin's memory alive. This year, actually, at the tournament, we're not that far from you guys if you want to come up to Allentown and enjoy it. We're going to have Charlie Manuel is going to be there, and he's going to be signing autographs. He's going to be part of our, what we call our mocktail mix-off, and we have 4 mixologists that Red Robin sponsors, and they make concoctions. He'll be a judge there. Like I said, he'll be signing autographs. And he's also going to be working with the combine program that we're doing for the teams. They will be competing in 2 different activities. So it should be a fun day. We have food trucks. We have a lot of stuff going on. So you might enjoy watching a lot of softball. A lot of softball's played. The message is not new. If you are not 21, drinking is illegal. I know you've heard this over and over again. If you're going to experiment with any drug or alcohol, please do not drive. First, think about that first choice, that choice to drink or to do any drugs. And understand, if you do, your brain just does not function the same way. You will make a bad decision, and if that involves driving, it could be fatal. The minute you get behind a wheel impaired, it's as if you have put a weapon to kill in your hands. All this pain both of our families are feeling is so senseless and so unnecessary and did not need to happen. My question to the group is, where were Ben's friends? Why did they not try to stop him from drinking and or from driving? You know, again, shortly after Justin died, a dear friend of mine came up to me and said that Justin had been at a party and there was drinking going on, and her daughter was there, and Justin was friendly with her daughter, and Danielle got up to leave, and Justin went over to her and said, "Have you been drinking? You know, maybe you shouldn't get in the car." And she said, "No, I'm fine." Well, he went to another friend to make sure that what she was telling him was correct. Now, I think Justin was the perfect child. Because I'm his mom. I'm just kidding there. He wasn't the perfect child. But at that moment, for whatever reason, he did stick his neck out and make sure that this friend of his was safe. And not only her, but anybody else that might be on the road at that time. So I guess the message here is that it's not just about you making the right choices. It's also to watch out for your friends and not let them make a stupid life-threatening choice. You know, ask those tough questions, and I know they're tough. Be the bad guy if you have to, or the uncool one. As Ben says, it's nice to fit in, but maybe you have to be the uncool one. This is your community. Own it. All of you in here are in your community. And look out for each other. It is a community effort. Students, players, teenagers looking out for each other, caring about your bud, your friend, your fellow student. Make your community a safe one. What can we say now? That tragedy that occurred that night continues to haunt all involved and impact our lives. Ben is not a monster. He's not a bad person. He just made some really bad decisions that night and continues to suffer with the guilt, and we are still suffering with our loss. We can't bring Justin back, and Ben can't go back and do a redo. It's done. A life was lost due to a senseless decision, and we will all continue to live with the outcome. Choosing to drink and then to drink and drive can change your lives, your families, your friends' lives forever. So please think and choose with our story in mind. I've got just at the end, in closing, I have 2 quotes that I'm going to read. The first one was a poem that was written by one of Justin's friends just after he died. I will never forget it as long as I live, the feeling that went through my bones. You're not there. Pick up the phone, they told me you were gone. I wish I was dreaming, but I'm wide awake. When we got to the house, everybody was there. It amazes me how you can bring us all together. We love you, our friend. Wait so patiently. Rest in peace. The second one is a quote I found in a book called A Broken Heart Still Beats, which I read shortly after Justin's death. And it was from a mother in Verdun, France, and she placed it on this little plaque in a field where there had been a lot of young sons killed during a World War I battle. A lot of people had lost their lives there. And on that little plaque, she wrote, "My son, since your eyes were closed, mine have never ceased to weep." I will never forget my son, never forget Justin. I hope you will not forget our story and will make your choices and your decisions accordingly. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'd like to introduce Cindy Walter, Ben's mother.
Good morning. I am Ben's mother. I have been speaking with Ben and Linda for the past 8 years. Believe me, speaking doesn't get any easier for me because I have to live with this tragedy, maybe not in the forefront of my mind, but somewhere in my mind, and always in my heart. Every year I think I should revise my speech, and I always review my speech, but there isn't much I can change because these are the facts, and you can't change facts. That incident in 2005 affected both of our families and many of our friends. You don't read about the effects on our lives in the newspapers, you just read about the facts. The event in Ocean City was a life-stopping and a life-changing event for all of us. Ben graduated from Wilson High School in Reading, Pennsylvania in 2005 and was going to pursue a career in architectural design at Lincoln Tech. He was just so happy to be graduating, and so was I. But before going off to school, he set off for senior week in Ocean City, Maryland. I struggled with letting him go, and he told me, he said, "Mom, I'm gonna be fine, everyone is going." I talked to my husband and my friends. They said, just let him go, he's gonna have fun, and then he'll go off to school. It's one decision that I wish I could take back. I should have stuck to my motherly instincts, but I can't change that decision that I made. I gave Ben that usual parent-teenager speech. I said, "I know you will be partying, but please be careful. If you are drinking, don't drive. You need to be responsible. That speech should have discouraged drinking and not approved of it. He left around June 10th with his friends, and I spoke with him daily. And the last time I spoke with him was around 5 o'clock in the evening on the 14th. He said he was having a great time. They were going to go out and get some food and go out for the evening. And he said, "I love you, Mom," before hanging up the phone. Now, I want you to imagine you as a parent or your parents receiving a phone call at 12:30 in the morning. It's that phone call that no parent ever wants to receive. The caller on the other end said, "Mrs. Walter, this is Jeff. Ben has been arrested. He hit a pedestrian, and I think the pedestrian's dead." I thought I was dreaming, or it was some kind of a cruel joke. You just wake up from being in a deep sleep. And I kept questioning Jeff, but I get no definite answers from him, all except that Ben was arrested. I remember screaming hysterically and trying to find my phone, and I called Ben on his cell phone. I must have dialed that number for at least a dozen times, and I begged for him to pick up, but he didn't. I then called my husband, who was working night shift, and it was hard for me to get the words out because I was crying so hysterically, and I just begged for him to come home. I remember pacing through the house and crying, and somehow I managed to find the phone number for the Ocean City Police Department. I called, and a female officer answered the phone, and I told her who I was and what information I needed, and she said, "I'm sorry, I can't give you that information because he's an adult." My next phone call was to Ben's father and his stepmother, and I remember how hysterical they were, and his father said to me, "Get ready, we're gonna head to Ocean City, Maryland." Now from Reading, Pennsylvania, that's about a 4 and a half hour ride to Ocean City. And it was one of the longest rides of my life because I had no definite answers. And when we got down there, what we were gonna face. So around 7:30 in the morning, we arrived in Ocean City, arrived at the police department, went in, and the officer said, we told the officer who we were. The officer said, again, he said, "I can't give you any information because Ben's an adult." But he said, you've come this far. He said, "I'll get a detective to come and speak with you." So they took us in a small room off of the receptionist area. I don't remember much that the officer said to us. I do remember him saying that the pedestrian was killed, and it was a male from Allentown area. He did say Ben was driving and intoxicated, and Ben would be arraigned sometime that day, but he wasn't sure when that was going to occur because they put 150 extra shifts of cops on duty for Ocean City for senior weeks, and that really stuck in my mind. He also told us that we needed to keep checking back throughout the day because they had so many to arraign. And I thought, I don't know what else was said to Ben's father because I went outside and sat on the curb for a while. And I thought to myself, really, how can this be happening? I'm going to wake up in my bed and everything is just going to be fine. But that didn't happen. We drove to a diner to sit and gather our thoughts. Our first phone call was to our daughter in New Jersey. She was living and working there. And then all the phone calls back to home, to our places of employment, our family, our friends. And we sat on a bench down near the First Street, down near the boardwalk, and I went into a business and came back out with a phone book and trying to decide what attorney we were going to call and who we were going to call down there to help us get Ben out. But it's hard when you're in a strange place to be making those major decisions. Around 10 o'clock, the story was on the internet and the news. I felt like I was just in a vacuum because we had all day just to wait to find out when Ben was going to be arraigned. We did head back up to the place where the kids were staying. All of his friends were there waiting for us. And we did ask the question, why did they allow him to drive his car when he was so intoxicated? But they were so intoxicated themselves, how could they make the decision to take his keys? That wasn't going to happen. Every hour we called the police department for an update. and every time, no news. So around 4 o'clock, we decided we would try to get a room somewhere and just wait it out. Because maybe, we weren't going to be able to get him out of jail that night. So we checked into a hotel, and I tried to relax, and I turned the TV on. And it was Action News, Channel 6 out of Philadelphia. And the first story on the 5 o'clock news was Ben's picture. I was really in shock. That was the moment, I think, that reality had really hit, that there it was right in front of me on the news. Family and a couple of family members and my sister and my daughter headed down to be with us in Ocean City. And we were sitting outside of the rooms, and we were going to head to bed for the night, and my cell phone rang. And it was a bail bondsman. And he said, "Mrs. Walter," he said, "I'm down here at the jail." He said, "Can you come down here, and I'll do whatever we need to do to get Ben out." He was arraigned around 11:30 that night, and I remember standing there, and 2 officers brought Ben down this long hall, and his hands were chained behind his back, and he had chains around his legs, and he was walking down this hall. And I tried to hug him. I went to hug him, and he said, "Mom, just don't look at me, don't touch me." And they sat Ben in this chair in front of a judge, and they read the charges, and I sat there quietly. It was DUI, $1,000 a year, homicide by vehicle, 1,005 years, failure to stop at the scene, $1,000 a year, failure to remain at the scene, $1,000 a year, and the bail was $50,000, which we had to post 10%, which was $5,000. We took Ben back at the hotel room, and what do you say to him? I wanted to hug Ben and say, "You know what, everything is just going to be okay," and that's what every mother wants to do. You want to kiss them and make it better for them. But I also wanted to scream at him, just grab him and shake him and say, what were you thinking? I don't understand. But I was just too exhausted. My mind was just too full of everything and what was the point? What was it going to solve? Thursday morning when we got up, the headlines in the Reading Eagle were Ben's picture. Graduate killed on 77th Street. Wilson grad drives drunk and kills pedestrian. We had breakfast together across the street at a pancake house. And it was all just small talk, just trying to get through the moments. And I wanted to get home, but we still had so much to do before we headed home. And one of the things I had to do was go to the police station, because I had to retrieve the items from Ben's car, because a lot of his friends said, "Hey, we have shirts and car keys and all kinds of stuff in Ben's car." So I went to the police station, and I said to the officer at the front desk, I would like you to go get the items out of Ben's car. And she said, "We've done processing the car. You're going to have to take the car." I said, "Well, I don't want the car." She said, "Well, you're going to have to take it somewhere." So I walked around the police station to the back, and the gentleman was back there at the impound center, and he pointed to where the car was, and he said, "You can get the items, and I'll help you find a place to tow the car to." Because it was an impound area, you had to pay a fee for the car to be there. So as I was walking back through, I noticed that the car had been backed into the space, so I had to see the damage to the car as I was going to the car, and that was very difficult for me. I gathered everything that I could possibly gather, got it out of the car, and headed back out of the impound, and they towed the car to a collision place in Ocean City for us. But that was very difficult for me. I didn't see the car ever again. That was the last time I saw the car. We met with 2 attorneys later that day, and they both had heard about the incident already and gave us an overview of the next steps and the worst possible sentence for Ben. And we headed back to Pennsylvania. I couldn't shut my mind off because there were so many decisions to make. But my first decision was to get Ben some help, because I knew that he was not mentally stable. The next morning, Friday, June 17th, the headlines in the paper read, "Spring Township Mail Post Bail and Traffic Death of Lehigh Resident." Believe me, there's a huge financial burden, and it's astronomical. Attorneys, investigators, accident reconstruction. I relived that every day. There was something coming in the mail, or someone calling me on the phone, to go over information. It's going on 10 years, and I can vividly recall every moment. And it's interesting because a good friend of mine, birthday was a couple weeks ago, and she said one of her favorite places is Ocean City. She said, I want to go down and celebrate my birthday. And I said, oh, okay. So my husband and I and her husband went down, but it's difficult to go down there because as you pass 77th Street and you pass the police station, it all comes back to you again. I'm not the same person, that I was prior to that accident, and I probably will not ever be that same person. Every day was a struggle for Ben, from the day of the accident until sentencing. He had depression with treatment. He had counseling, addiction counseling, inpatient and outpatient. And like he said, he was on house arrest for 7 months. I really don't remember much about those 7 months. It was just trying to get through every day, because I had to take all the information in from the attorneys. Speaking with the attorneys, we had to go back down to Ocean City and sit with the attorneys and go over everything. But we knew that if Ben was convicted, he would serve 5+ years at a Maryland state penitentiary. So he took a plea agreement on February 6th of 2006. DUI, homicide by vehicle, 2 years, 3 years probation, $9,000 restitution to Justin's family for funeral expenses, and 40 hours a year for 3 years public speaking with Justin. That day in the courtroom was very difficult for me. I remember the attorneys speaking. I remember Ben's statement to the Sheftels, and to see Justin's family for the first time was very difficult for me. And after the hearing, we followed the attorneys to the jail. And I remember that was so difficult for me because from that moment I realized I wouldn't be able to hold or touch him for a long time, because every time that I would see Ben, it was behind a glass wall. I did visit Ben every other weekend at the jail in Snow Hill, Maryland, Worcester County Jail, for 5 months. I needed to call the jail on a Tuesday and schedule my time. I would see him for a little bit on Saturday, stay overnight, and see him again on Sunday. And you need to imagine not seeing your parents. They're not able to hug or kiss you. You can't touch them. I also would make sure that I was home every evening, so I would never miss that phone call from Ben. But I have my son, and Linda does not have Justin, and that's very difficult for me. One of Ben's letters to me: I hate how everything turned out in my life so far. The bad seems to overcome the good in my eyes right now. I'm sorry this letter isn't a positive one. I just can't help but feel like shit sometimes, especially when I get to see you and talk to you behind a glass wall. Don't get me wrong, I love it when you come, but it's just hard. I can't imagine what it's like for you to see your little boy in the one place you least expect him to be. I want to say I'm sorry, Mom, I really am. Just know that I will be a better man than I was, and I will make you proud of me. But the worst struggle Ben will deal with the rest of his life is taking a life by drinking and driving. He made that wrong decision to get behind the wheel of the car with a blood alcohol level of 0.16, twice the legal definition of intoxicated. That decision has changed his life and our lives forever. I can't imagine what my son sees every day when he closes his eyes, and I can't imagine what it's like to lose a son, what the Sheftels have to face every day. It's very painful for me. Another of Ben's letters to me: no one understands what it's like to see the person for the first and the last time. I mean, having kids smash through the windshield and the sound is enough to make your heart stop and skip a beat. To tell you the truth, Mom, I don't know how I'm going to live like this. My head is still messed up. I am up for the challenge, though, or the 5 million mile high mountain covered in razor-sharp glass. I read his letters often to find some kind of comfort that I have done everything to be a good mother. I believe that every mother asks herself this question at one time or another. The past 10 years have been a personal struggle for me, and a struggle watching my son deal with a negative self-worth and coming to terms with the terrible mistake he made. Ben's setback in 2008 was another hurdle, but a clear message to all of us that June 15th, 2005 was a life-changing event. It will never go away. It is what it is. He wrote me a letter when he was in Berks County Prison. I still feel horrible on the inside. I think you and Linda should carry out the message for me. I might be able to join you later. I really don't know how people are going to react to me drinking and driving again, They won't understand why. I wanted to die that night when I was pulled over. I just couldn't take the insanity in my mind. I'm not the person everyone thought I was. I was just a screw-up. I'm trying really hard to keep my spirits up, but it is hard. What do you and everyone see in me, Mom, because I am lost? The first year of our speaking tour, we spoke to thousands of parents, students, and teachers at 40-plus engagements. In 2008, Linda and I continued with the message and spoke at approximately 20-plus engagements, and we continue to do so every year. We both think it will get easier, but it doesn't. It's very difficult to hear each other's pain and struggles and to relive the accident. You know at what point in the speech where each of us struggle. I tell you this because we are here to make a difference. We do not want any other mother, father, daughter, son to suffer the pain that we have and continue to endure. Just a little bit about Ben, where he is right now, and what's happening with him. Over the years, it was a struggle for him because Ben has a felony on his record. So any employer that he would go to would do a background check, and that felony prohibited him from a lot of positions and jobs. He wanted to pursue a career in nursing. They'd do a background check on him, and that he couldn't do that. He wanted to go into the military. Of course, he couldn't do that. So it goes and follows you for the rest of your life and his life. He can't vote. But right now, I mean, he really has struggled, but he is really doing well right now. He bought a house a couple years ago, and he decided that he wanted to go to New York City, and he pursued some modeling. He did some modeling for a while. Ben is very good with his hands, and he hooked up with a company in New York City where they do all the runways for fashion weeks, and he does a lot of also work for the Broadway shows. So he's doing very well. He lives in Brooklyn. He navigates really well around New York City, so he's doing really well. But it was a long struggle for him. We all have a very strong message to deliver. Every decision that you make in your life has an outcome. It can be a positive one or a negative one. You can choose to get behind that wheel intoxicated, but I can guarantee that eventually you will suffer some type of negative consequence, and I only hope and pray that it's not the consequence that Ben has had to deal with the rest of his life. It's your choice. I cannot stress enough that underage drinking is illegal and will have a negative impact. It is not okay for you to be drinking if you're under 21. It is not okay. Drinking and driving are a lethal mixture, illegal and will have a negative outcome. Please, for the sake of the memory of Justin and Ben, and for their family and friends on both sides, do not get behind the wheel or be a passenger in a car of someone who has been drinking. Give up your keys or take theirs. On a last note, by a show of hands, how many of you are scheduled to attend Senior Week in any of the beach resorts? Okay, pretty many of you. It would be my wish that you wouldn't do that, because I witnessed so many unsafe behaviors in Ocean City, Maryland. But if you do decide to go, you need to practice safe behaviors. You need to not be drinking and driving. You shouldn't be drinking at all. I want you to come home safe. I want you to come home safe to your family and your friends. It's not the rite of passage to be a part of the last hurrah Senior Week. Your rite of passage was being brought into this world by your parents. I truly understand that each senior wants to go to the beach and have fun with their friends before starting their new life adventure. But you need to ask yourself what your definition of fun is. It's not underage drinking, and it's not all those unsafe behaviors. I am asking that you give up your week at Ocean City and spend the week volunteering for a worthy cause in the name of Justin. Thank you. Now we'd like to open up the floor to questions. If you have a question for Ben, I'm pretty used to knowing what his answer might be to the question. So you could ask a question of myself or Linda or something pertaining to Ben. Any questions? I know it's always difficult to be the first one, but I know you have questions. No? Oh, yes.
Hold on.
So how tough would prison life have been for him during that 13 months?
Well, Linda has a good response to that, how prison life would have been if he would have gotten the...
Who asked the question so I can look at you? Okay. When we met with the prosecuting attorney, one of the things that he shared with us was that if Ben went to the state penitentiary as opposed to where he went, which was a local, right?
He went to Worcester County.
Yeah, Worcester County, to a county jail, that, and I'm going to be real frank here, that within 3 months he would have been physically and sexually abused, probably, because he was young, and that's kind of the way the jail works. So it would not have been a pleasant experience, and so that's one reason for the plea agreement, was because he was able then to stay in the county jail, and that was a much less, there was much less violence and stuff going on there. So I don't know what it was like there for him, but I know it was a lot less than what he would have gotten if he had gone to the state penitentiary. I hope that answered your question. Okay.
More questions? Yeah. I think there's one back there. I'm not sure.
Okay, so mine's about Ben. What Broadway shows has he worked with?
I'm not sure. He's really not specific with me, but they do like a lot of the stage. What do they call that? Yeah, all the. What do they call it? They build all the sets. He helps to build the sets, but mostly he does a lot of the runways and gala parties up there. They set up, they do all this fancy work for these parties up there. And he has done some work in some local businesses up there when they remodel the businesses. So he's very good with his hands. He's enjoying it. He loves New York. Lives in Brooklyn. I think there's one back there.
Hello. Are you familiar with the incident that occurred on 309, that kid that was walking home from the party? I believe it was a female drunk driver that hit him.
I am not. Was this recently?
It was, I believe, 2 years ago. Does anyone know does anyone know his name? Dennis.
No, I'm not. I'm sorry.
All right, never mind. I was just wondering if you were a part of the.
I don't know. Should I know that?
Hey guys,
Hi.
you know, I've been listening, so I was just wondering if you guys are okay, you know? How are you dealing with this whole thing?
You mean speaking?
Well, yeah, because, you know, I'm guessing this takes a toll, so I was just wondering if you guys were okay, you know?
We're okay. I'm okay.
So how long did it take for you guys to develop, like an all-right relationship, knowing what both of your sons did?
It was difficult in the beginning,
Yeah.
and I think Linda would agree with that. It doesn't get any easier to speak with, because we both know it's a lot of pain and suffering. I have a tremendous respect for Linda and her family. And so we do this just so this doesn't happen to anyone else. That's our purpose. And we've got the word out to a lot of, I don't even know how many high schools we've spoken to. It's just, so, I mean, I can't speak for Linda, but I have a lot of respect for Linda.
Why isn't Ben here today?
He lives and works in New York City, so it's difficult for him to get away from work. That's why we have him on video. We did the video, I think, 2 years ago. But up until that point, he was pretty much attending all the presentations. I'm glad he can see them. I can't see them.
This goes out to Justin's mom, but my question is, in Ben's video, he was talking about how he was going through such a hard time afterwards and how you came and talked to him. What made you want to do that? Wouldn't you want to stay away from him and have hatred towards him?
Well, Cindy called me, I think it was a Sunday night, and said, you're not going to like to hear this, but Ben has been arrested again for a DUI, and he was trying to kill himself. And I remember the first words out of my mouth, I think, were, would it help if I came to talk to him? And Cindy said yes. She thought it would help. So I remember running up, my husband was upstairs running up and going, I'm going to go see Ben, he's in jail. And I think my husband looked at me like I was nuts. And I got a friend to take me. I actually called my therapist before I went because I was scared. I was scared I was going to say the wrong thing to him, or it wouldn't come across right, or I could do more harm than good. I was nervous, and so it was hard. But it was necessary. I made sure he understood that we forgave him, and that this isn't what Justin would want. He'd want Ben to have a good life and to live a full, good life. So that was the message. So yeah, it was hard, and it was a little scary too at the same time. I hope that answered your question. One more.
Do you know exactly how fast Ben was driving?
Our lawyer told us he was going around 60. I think that was probably, yeah. He, again, when you're behind the wheel and you're drunk, he was twice the legal limit. You're not aware of how fast you're going. You're just driving, I think.
Yeah, so I know that, with the suicidal experiences that he was happening, obviously you could tell he was depressed, but were there any telltale signs that it was getting to that extreme level before he actually tried to commit suicide, thinking back on it now?
No, he hid it very well. And it didn't come to my attention. I didn't know, I had been away, and I did not know that he had been arrested for that second DUI. He kept that hidden. A couple days later, my husband called me and he said, you need to come home, something's wrong with Ben. Well, at that time, he had drank some type of glue remover, and he had found some pills that I had because I had a hip problem, that I had been in an accident and had a hip problem. He had found my pills and had taken an overdose of pills. So I had not known that all that stuff was going on. He hid it very well. He was the type that he would keep all his emotions and everything inside of him. So it was very difficult, to see any change in Ben.
Does Ben still drink?
Well, he's of age. He lives in New York City. He drinks socially. I know when he's home and he, is having a beer or a glass of wine, he does not get behind the wheel of that car. Well, actually, he doesn't own a car anymore because he gets around New York City with the subway and everything. But he made some really strong changes in his life, and he does not do that, no. If he's somewhere and he's, at a friend's house, he'll stay overnight, or he's a real strong advocate of that. Do not drink and drive. Okay. One more?
We'll take one last one.
Okay, one more. Maybe I can hear him. He's right here. For me to forgive Ben? Oh, for you. Okay. Yeah.
Sure. It was difficult. It felt like it was a process I had to go through. So it was something that you don't wake up one day and say, I forgive him. It took some time. It's a process. I don't think everybody in my family and or his friends have come to that same conclusion. But also it didn't seem right, or it didn't feel good to just be angry and resentful. That wasn't going to get us anywhere. So that made it easier to, I think, go through the process to forgive.
Thank you. I began today by reminding you of Wednesday's DUI reenactment. And Wednesday was an impressive show. Lights, sirens, ambulance, crash cars, victims, helicopter. The reality is, by the time you were dismissed to go back to fourth period on Wednesday, Liana, who was pronounced dead at the scene, was seated in a chair listening to Judge Duffy. Nicole, who was airlifted by the helicopter, was back amongst all of us, and I believe Allie, who was arrested and taken away, was out of cuffs and seated next to me. You heard today the story of a real DUI and the real outcomes for families and for those involved. We saw a show of hands of how many are planning to go to shore destinations for senior week. There's no words I can say to implore you, as the ladies did today, not to make the wrong decisions. We always hold this. We're a couple weeks from your senior prom. 7 weeks from today, you'll be graduates of North Penn High School, and some of you may be in Ocean City, Maryland. The question from stage was asked, where were the friends? Why didn't they take the keys? The reality is you don't have to be a friend to take someone's keys from them. Okay? Sticking your neck out, as was said, is important. We never hear the stories of those that didn't get in the car crash, didn't have the accident because a friend took their keys or a stranger took their keys. Right? And those are the happy endings. So I implore you, as the next 2, 3, 7 weeks move forward, and as some of you go off to college, you remember what we heard today. You remember the story of Ben and Justin, and carry that forward with you. I'd like you to all just one more time thank the ladies here for coming out today and speaking to us.